Welcome to EnglishPass Podcast, brought to you from our local studio in Calgary. I'm your host, Samantha, and today we're diving into an exciting topic: micromanaging the staff. Whether you're a beginner or intermediate learner, in this podcast, we're helping you level up your English listening and reading skills. And before we get started, let me tell you that the sponsor of this episode is TypeFit, keyboard typing practice and learning service. Today, we're exploring something really interesting: micromanaging the staff. This is a wonderful subject for English learners because it covers a lot of practical vocabulary and real-world situations. So let's dive right in. Micromanaging the staff is a specific management style where a supervisor or boss monitors and controls every tiny detail of an employee's work. Instead of giving a team member a goal and letting them find their own way to reach it, a micromanager dictates exactly how every single step should be performed. This behavior often stems from a lack of trust or a deep fear that things will go wrong if the manager is not personally involved in every decision. In the professional world, we often use the word autonomy to describe the freedom to make your own decisions and manage your own time. When a manager refuses to give this autonomy, they are essentially telling their staff that their skills and judgments are not good enough, which can be very discouraging for even the most talented worker. To understand this concept fully, we must look at how it looks in real life, why it happens, and what it does to a company. Let us look at a real-world example in a creative office. Imagine a graphic designer working at a busy advertising agency. Their boss, Sarah, asks them to create a logo for a new client. Instead of waiting for the first draft to be finished, Sarah sits at the designer's desk for 3 hours. She tells them to move a line 2 millimeters to the left, then back to the right, then change the shade of blue by 1%. This is a classic example of micromanagement. Sarah is not truly managing the project. She is simply using the employee as a human mouse. This leads to a massive loss of productivity, which is a measure of how much work a person can get done in a certain amount of time. If Sarah spent that time looking for new clients or planning the company's future, the business would grow. Instead, she is stuck in the tiny details, and the designer feels like they have no creative voice. Looking back at history, the idea of controlling every movement of a worker became popular during the Industrial Revolution. A man named Frederick Taylor developed something called scientific management in the early 20th century. He believed there was one single best way to do every task, like shoveling coal or using a machine. Managers would watch workers with stopwatches to ensure they did not waste a single second. While this approach worked for simple factory tasks where speed was the only goal, it fails miserably in the modern world, where we need creative and independent thinking. Today, most successful companies have moved toward a style called servant leadership, where the manager's job is to remove obstacles for the employees, not to create them. Consider a second example involving office communication. Imagine an office worker named David. David's manager insists on being copied or CC'd on every single email David sends. It does not matter if the email is a major report or just a message to a colleague asking for a stapler. This manager spends 4 hours every day reading through hundreds of David's emails. This creates a bottleneck, which is a situation where the flow of work is stopped or slowed down because everything must pass through one specific person. Because the manager is too busy reading David's emails, they do not have time to approve the big budget for next year. The whole company slows down because of one person's need for control. Why do people do this? Often, it is because they feel a sense of security when they know everything that is happening. They confuse being busy with being effective. Another important term to understand in this context is delegation. Delegation is the act of giving a task or responsibility to another person. A good leader knows how to delegate effectively. They explain what the goal is and why it matters, but they let the employee handle the how. A micromanager fails at delegation because they cannot let go of the specific methods. For example, imagine a retail store owner who is so worried about the shop that they watch the security cameras from home every minute of the day. They call the store clerk every 10 minutes to say, "You did not smile enough at that customer," or "Why did you put the red shirt on the top shelf instead of the bottom?" The clerk eventually loses their morale. Morale refers to the confidence, enthusiasm, and discipline of a person or group. When morale is low, people stop caring about their work. They start looking for a new job, which leads to high turnover. Turnover means employees leave the company frequently, which is very expensive for a business because they must constantly hire and train new people. In some cultures, high levels of supervision are actually seen as a sign of a dedicated boss. However, there is a big difference between being a supportive leader and being an intrusive one. A supportive boss provides the resources and training an employee needs to succeed. An intrusive boss provides constant interruptions that break an employee's concentration. A common misconception is that micromanaging ensures high quality. People think that if they watch everything, no mistakes will happen. In reality, it often does the opposite. When employees feel watched, they become nervous, and nervous people make more mistakes. They stop thinking for themselves and start waiting for instructions for every single thing. This creates a workforce of people who cannot solve problems on their own. Let us think about a software developer. Suppose a lead programmer rewrites every line of code their junior developers write. Instead of teaching the juniors how to improve their skills, the lead just does the work for them. The juniors never learn anything new, and the lead programmer becomes physically and mentally exhausted from doing 3 people's jobs at once. This is a waste of human capital, the skills and knowledge that employees bring to a company. If the lead programmer continues this way, they will experience burnout, and the company will have no one trained to take over bigger projects in the future. Why is it so hard for some managers to stop? Often, it is related to something called the Peter Principle. This is an observation that people in a hierarchy tend to rise to their level of incompetence. For example, a person might be a fantastic salesperson, so the company promotes them to be a sales manager. However, being a manager requires a completely different set of skills than being a salesperson. Because the new manager does not know how to manage people, they go back to what they know, the sales details. They start telling their sales team exactly what words to say on every phone call. They are trying to be a salesperson again instead of learning how to be a leader. Another example can be found in the restaurant industry. A manager in a fancy restaurant might spend the entire night standing in the kitchen, checking the garnish on every single plate. Meanwhile, the customers in the dining room are waiting 20 minutes for their drinks because the manager is not looking at the big picture. They are focused on a tiny sprig of parsley while the front of the restaurant is falling into chaos? Can a ship sail smoothly if the captain is busy polishing the brass on the deck instead of looking at the stars to navigate? Of course not. A leader must stay at a high level to see the dangers and opportunities ahead. Micromanagement also kills innovation. Innovation is the ability to create new and better ways of doing things. If a school principal visits every classroom every day just to check if the desks are in perfectly straight rows, the teachers will be too afraid to try new teaching methods. They will stick to the old, boring ways because they know the principal only cares about the desks being straight. The school then stops improving, and the students suffer. To foster innovation, a manager must be willing to accept that there might be a better way to do a task than the way they have always done it. Ultimately, micromanaging is about fear. It is the fear of losing control and the fear of being held responsible for someone else's mistake. But great leadership requires the courage to trust others. It requires a manager to set clear expectations, provide the necessary tools, and then step back to let the staff perform. When a manager stops micromanaging, they often find that their team is more capable than they ever imagined. The employees feel valued, the work gets done faster, and the manager finally has time to focus on the long-term goals of the organization. Moving from a controlling style to a trusting style is the most important step any supervisor can take to become a true leader. It takes time and patience, but the results are always worth the effort. Growing a business is not about doing everything yourself. It is about building a team that can do things without you. And that's all for today's episode of EnglishPass Podcast. I hope you found this helpful. Remember to practice what you've learned and don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how we improve. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and join us next time. Let me remind you that the sponsor of the episode is TypeFit, and I suggest to check the link at the description. I'm Samantha, and I'm excited to be your host for many more fascinating episodes to come. Until then, keep learning and keep growing. Goodbye.